To the September 19th Rutherford County School System Work Session. First order of business is our Pledge of Allegiance, led by Mr. Butch Vaughn.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you please bow your heads for a moment of silence? Thank you. The first order of business is the approval of
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you put the microphone next to you? Because so sorry.
Is that better? I'm so sorry. Okay, the approval of the agenda. I'll give you just a few minutes to look that over. Do you have any comments or questions? Okay. How about the approval of the consent agenda? Any questions or comments there? If not, let's move on. We do not have any public comment. We're going to do Rutherford Proud on Thursday and number 7, and then we move to number 8. Our first order of business is Mr. James Evans, our Chief Communications Officer, is going to present to us.
Good evening. I'm also joined by Milan Ragland-Hudgens, who is one of our communications specialists in the communications department, very valuable. Milan and I both have a background in journalism, and then we also work with Barton, who also has a background in communications. So one thing that Dr. Sullivan has asked us to do is to, once a month, starting with the new board, he wanted us to provide an update on just some of the communications analytics that we measure every month. So Milan is going to talk to you a little bit about our social media channels and the kind of interaction that we're seeing from the public. So you'll have on your table there a report, and you'll want to look at this side, the one that has like the 5 pictures of Bob.
And I'll give communications credit because we met back in April, I guess, of last year and really talked about long-term and short-term plans and goals, and the organization, leadership, and just the teamwork has definitely seen an increase in just the effectiveness of our communications team. So great job of your team.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. So you'll see before you, you'll see some numbers from August 2023, which kind of serve as our benchmark for when our department became a 3-person team. And then below that, you'll see the numbers for last month and the over-under for the month of July. I will tell you that we have worked very hard not only to tell meaningful stories, but to get them in front of the right people at the right time. As you may be familiar with social media, each platform kind of has its own demographic. 2 of the things we're most proud of, one of them is all of our communications, all the numbers that you see are organic. We don't pay to boost any posts. We don't pay for any ads. So it's the work of all of us, plus the teachers that submit content to us, and some of the people here in central office that just kind of make our jobs a little more easier. One of the numbers you'll see is the growth in Instagram and YouTube as far as subscribers and both time watched. Instagram, we've grown about 900 or so in the last, since March. And we're up to 7,000. That was a really big deal for us to celebrate. And also YouTube, if you look back to last August. We have already, within the month of August this year, more than doubled the number of hours watched. So Sunday Message and any of those special things that you see on YouTube or social media, all that is done in-house. Most of that by Barton. But we're so proud of the work we do. We're so proud of the district that we're in, and we just thank you guys for investing in us, and we appreciate it.
So on the report, you'll see there, we'll do this every month, but we're not going to go over every number, of course. You can just see some of the growth. One number that's a little bit down is actually Twitter, and or X, whatever you want to call it. But one thing we attribute to that is that platform is kind of going through a weird phase of its evolution, and so there are users falling off of that platform somewhat, and so we think that's affecting our numbers too. The 5 pictures at the bottom of the report show you the most popular items that we've had this month, that parents and the community have been most popular. That first one is the graduation schedule, of course. The second one is Dr. Sullivan's first Sunday message of the school year. The third one is the turf dedication write-up that we did from Rockville. The fourth there is Miss Christina Penny, the new principal of Brown's Chapel. Barton and Land have been working on video profiles of all the new principals, and that was our first one. It was extremely well liked and followed. And then the fifth one is the 100th anniversary celebration at Walter Hill Elementary School. The back page will also show you our report from our website. And again, I'm not going to go over all of the information here, but it shows you some comparisons between July to August, but also shows you the most popular pages, which is valuable for us as a communications team because we can see what it is that parents are interested in. So the most popular page, of course, is the home page. Bus routes and school zones was the second. The academic calendar was the third. Registration and enrollment was the fourth. The list of schools, lunch menus, and then available jobs. That all coincides with the beginning of a school year, so it makes sense. We'll be tracking that every month to see how they may change or which pages become more or less popular as we move through the school year, and that kind of helps us drive some of our content. What questions do you have for the communications department? Okay, Mr. Vaught looks like he has like a really mischievous grin on his face. It looks like he has a really good question.
That's normal.
No, I was going to, obviously, this is kind of the business that I'm in. In the real estate and auction business, I was looking at your numbers, comparing them to ours, and watching it, trying to figure out the demographics to each platform, who's following who's following what, and those kinds of things. And we're still learning too, but very impressive, very impressive. Yeah,
so basically, this is in general, but in general, Facebook skews a little towards your older parents, myself included, and grandparents are that's the largest growing part of that demographic because they want to see grandkids. That's what we're hearing. Interesting, though, when kids leave high school and go into college, Facebook rebounds, and that's kind of interesting because Facebook started as a college social media. It was really one of the first ones other than like MySpace. Instagram is still very popular with teenagers and younger adults, but again, that's all part of the same company, which is Meta. Twitter is a mixed bag right now, and YouTube, it just depends on what type of content you put out, depending on what you draw. My kids love YouTube, but they're watching very different things than I am. They're watching kids play, which is the weirdest trend on YouTube. They love to watch other kids play, which I think is very weird. But I asked my son last night, what was he doing? He goes, oh, so-and-so's playing a game. Great, I'm glad that you're learning through another kid. That's great. So, but we try to hit all of those. And then LinkedIn is also another popular social media, but of course it's geared towards those who are seeking jobs. But in our county, that's a very popular thing to be pursuing are jobs. And so our HR department uses LinkedIn quite a bit to help attract jobs. And we've seen a great deal of success this year because I think we're still fewer than like 20 open positions, which is amazing for a district our size. So there you go. If there's anything that you want us to cover every month that we don't cover, we're happy to add those in. Milan loves speaking in public. So I didn't tell her till today she was going to be doing part of this presentation, and I thought she was going to use some bad words at me, but that's it. Barton will be here Thursday. I will not be here. He's not giving a presentation, but if you want to pick on him too, that's perfectly fine.
This is impressive because in just a year, if you take Twitter out, y'all have not only doubled, but sometimes tripled your viewership and followers in these areas, and you didn't boost it or do anything.
Right, this is all organic.
Exactly.
No one tells your story better than you do. That's our philosophy, and so we love that the media covers us and tells our story too, but our teachers, our principals, our staff, we know what's happening in our schools better than anyone else, and so that's part of that marketing push that we've been doing, part of the rebranding and all those things. So just appreciate the board's support.
Okay. I worked with Mr. Stearns for a long time, and I tell you, the job that he's done over the years, and the way he's presented Rutherford County Schools is the reason that we've done as well as we have about attracting people to Rutherford County. I mean, I don't know of any other system that has as good a media presentation program as James has brought in, and I'm just glad we got him. So.
Well, we have a statewide group. It's always a team effort. It's never just one person. That table over there, they do so much to support what we do that we couldn't do it without them. Our schools do as well. But I mean, it's becoming more and more necessary to be marketing focused as we enter into an age of more competition within schools. So that's what we're trying to do.
Have somebody to pull the wagon.
Yep.
Mr. Rosales?
Yes, thank you. I just want to say, I love this. The colors look amazing. So thank you so very much for continuously doing really good work, and thank you for reporting on this and showing you the labor and the love that you put into this. So thank you very much. I just wanted to give you some kudos.
Thank you.
A shout out.
Anyone else that would like to comment?
Okay, so I'm going to tell him one more thing. I've already told Ms. Darby this, but we have our first month of the SOS Award, which is the Strong Outstanding Staff Award that we started this month. We'll be naming the first 4 winners next week, but we have more than 220 nominations so far.
Excellent. That's wonderful.
And a good variety and mixture, and so we'll be picking those next week. The leadership team will be picking those. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
is it possible to go back to the use of facilities for just a second?
Yes, we can.
I guess I have a real problem with, these clubs and everything, use facilities, but they don't get everything done, and we pretty well allow them to go ahead and use the facilities and play them. And I would really like to see us come down and just make that, if you don't have it, you don't use the facilities. Because I'm afraid we're going to be exposed from a liability standpoint, If somebody was to get seriously hurt and they didn't have the insurance they should have, and, and I see, 6 or 7 of them, so.
Have we had any instances?
No, but if that's something the board's interested in, my suggestion would be to put it on the October 1st board meeting agenda for us to discuss and vote on. Make note of that, Dawn.
Going back, we're moving on to number 9, instruction.
Instruction tab 2, under the supervision of the special education coordinator and assistive technology educational assistant is requested to assist students and teachers with assistive technology needs, including but not limited to post-training follow-up, observations, fidelity checks, and data collection. This position will be funded through IDEA Part B funds. And that's Fund 142, our federal funds.
Excellent. Part 2, academic calendar request.
Madam Chair?
Yes, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to clarify, those are recurring funds that we get every year, correct? So this isn't one that's going to fall off and then go into the general?
Our allocations change a little bit every year, but that'll be up to the special education department, how they budget what positions they need versus what they don't need.
But not like the ESSER funds that are dropping off,
They're
correct?
there year after year.
Okay.
Anything else? Sorry, didn't mean to move on without your question. Okay, number 2, academic calendar request.
So this is a little bit strange. We will have the official academic calendar for the board to vote on at our next board meeting. The committee met last Monday, so it was past our deadline to already have this submitted. However, TSSAA, if you've seen the news the last couple of years, they really struggle finding qualified and a number of officials right now. And so they require you to pick which week you want fall break so that they don't have to pick officials for that week. And if you play during the week that you picked as fall break, they are not guaranteeing you officials. And so I know that may be strange, but our schools are 2 years out already in scheduling, especially being a big county. We have a lot of schools who struggle to find matchups. And so this was their request to have all districts by October 1st have to them what their next 2 years fall break is going to be so they can guarantee fall break. This follows what we have done for as many years as I can remember, and it's the first full week of October. And so again, and I'll have the full calendar for everybody to vote on that has spring break, winter break, all the in-service days, all that at the next board meeting. But this is just so I can submit it to you, SAA.
Okay. Any questions?
Can we, is it possible we could maybe work with the city and sort of coordinate?
Yeah, they usually take ours and then go from there.
Okay.
Excellent. Number 10, Human Resources.
Yeah, so a couple, you guys all have an insurance committee recommendation. John, will you hand me the... I'm not a member of the insurance committee, but I did want to thank our team. So we have Brian Sears, Dr. Anthony, Brian Runyon, Jennifer Schmidt is new to us, but not new to us. So Jennifer was with the county and now is on our team. So it's nice to be on our team, and thank you for your work and the expertise you will bring to this position. So your official title is benefits coordinator, and so she was one of our new budgeted position to be able to use. So just to give a little bit of background, we moved to the state insurance 2 years ago, so open enrollment actually started in August or September of 2022. So under the state plan, you don't necessarily get to choose what options you are going to provide. They decide that for you. With that, we have two providers. We have Blue Cross Blue Shield and Cigna. So those are the two providers with Partners for Health is what they call it, Partners TN for Health. With that, you have 4 tiers. And so if you think about it, you got 2 providers, and then within that, you have 4 tiers. You have your premier tier, standard, limited, and then local CDHP or HSA. So premier, standard, limited, and local. And within each one of those, you have your different options that you're used to seeing with an insurance broker. Is you can choose just to have an employee, employee and child, employee and a spouse, or an entire family. And so that's kind of how it works. Within those 4 tiers, though, you then have 2 options. So you can choose what is called Network S under Blue Cross Blue Shield, or local under Cigna. Or you can choose the option for Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is Network P, or Open Access. The top of the line far right quadrant that you were looking at would be your Network P and Open Access in that Premier plan. So that is the most expensive. If you guys will, and I'll kind of scroll through some of this. On the second page, our committee had some recommendations and also some rationale that we looked at and some parameters. First one being, overall, there was a 5.9% increase communicated by the state for 2025. The state gives you the premiums. This is how much the premiums cost, and it's up to each district to determine how they then want to structure the level of benefit they provided. We, of course, we've talked about for over a year, we do have cost limitations based on our budget constraints. We are just at about 10% of our entire operating budget is health insurance alone. That does not include salary, does not include Social Security, Medicare, any of the things that come along with benefits. 10% is health insurance right at it. So the last couple years, we have done salary increases. We did a 4%, 5%, last year 2.5%. And we did split the last year with the employees. We covered half and they covered half of the salary or the benefit increase. This year, however, we're just not in that boat. And so what I charged the committee with, and I didn't like this because it definitely limits what options they had, but basically it was we can look to afford about $700,000 additional. Because what decisions we're making don't just impact this budget year, they impact next budget year as well, because this is for a calendar year starting January 1st, so it covers 2 budget cycles. So the other thing the board currently does, is the way we have operated for many years, is that we basically, if you take the more expensive plan, we pay more for the more expensive plan. And so it's not going to be shocking when you look at the numbers here that you are going to see most people choose the most expensive plan, because that's what the county or the school system provides most funding for. It's also important to note that when we went from the county to the state, we saved quite a bit of money for our employees. We're just about now getting back to where we were, probably just a little bit above based on what we do this year. But where most of the market, most of the country has had substantial increases, we are just now getting back to asking employees to fund what they needed to fund 2 years ago. So I think that's an important factor. The other thing that is important, and we will have a message to employees about, is to truly look to see which plan do you need. If we, for whichever option, both of them increase cost, truly looking to see are your doctors under which plan. And we're going to discuss some positives and negatives with that as well. The next page shows you how many people are choosing each plan. You are going to see, again, what we talk about is that open access and local plus. This is for Cigna, but you can see just how much people are choosing that higher plan, which is the Network P or that open access. We have more people choosing that than we do people choosing the cheaper plan. Again, we pay more for that, so that makes sense of why they're choosing. If you flip over to the next page, here were the two, we went through multiple iterations of what we were looking for. But the middle of the page, there's a couple things I want to talk about. You will see that in column 1, we have 2 scenarios here for the board to consider. One is a proportional, so that employees who are paying more to have that premium network are going to start paying more for that premium network. So if you need the premium network, you need to pay for that. That does come with a negative caveat, and that Stonecrest TriStar is the only one that is under that premium network. And so that limits somewhat of the north end. However, we could also have St. Thomas Rutherford at any time move in and out of all these. We don't control who they choose. MMC is in conversations to pull out of Cigna. I mean, that's a moving target as far as which groups are covered by which network. The next couple, you will see the insurance cost is $67 million. This is employee and employer combined. The middle is what I wanted to highlight. You'll see employee portion overall as a county is $12 million, and the employer portion is $55 million. So we budgeted right at about $55 million last year, and working on our budget, I look to see that we should have about $700,000 with fast growth funding and with direct outcome funding that we can cover. And so that's what they were working with, was about $700,000. You'll see we are still overall, that third to the last column, we're still as a district covering 81% of all plans. So we have always tried to be above 80-20. We're at about 85-15, then it was 84-16. This takes about 2% difference. And that second to last column shows you what we have budgeted as far as how much of an increase that'll be. So option 1, $699, option 2, $707. Again, it's a little bit of a shot in the dark based on what options the employee actually chooses. We have both scenarios down there. Scenario 1, 2025 increase is passed along proportionally for the plans. So employees can then buy up, or if you want that premier plan, then you have to pay extra for the premier plan. And when we look at premiums in just a minute, it's pretty substantial if you want to pay up for that premium access. Scenario 2, it doesn't matter which plan you choose, the county is going to absorb 20% of the increase, just to all employees. So that does not help us long term. It does help us kind of bide a little bit more time to see if there's any changes as far as what plans cover which one, whether or not the local would start to cover TriStar. But again, it's going to pretty much continue increasing costs as time goes on. You will see that I'm very proud of the insurance committee. We had teachers, EAs, a member pretty much from every group you could imagine, retiree, somebody that had a high cost, and then somebody that was single with a low cost to try to cover everyone. We asked them to look at it from a business perspective, and they chose option one based on that. But again, I see pros and cons to both of them. There's not a great scenario there. You'll see the next one talks again about just some summaries and what we will communicate to employees. There was a 5.9% state aid increase. What employees always struggle with, and this is my third year doing it, so it's something that's always there and it's shared, is that we got a 2.5% raise, but my insurance went up 5.9%, so I'm losing money. That 5.9% is on a lot less money than your overall salary. So you get a 2.5% raise on your entire salary, to where the 5.9% increase is just on premiums. So those are not comparing apples to apples. The state only requires you to fund 45% of your insurance plans. You will see we are well above that. We're above 81. This does provide the option to level up and pay if you want to. Employees have the choice to go down to narrow plans if they want to not pay that extra. We did have to look at budget considerations. We've talked a little bit about the past salary increases, and we know this year that we will probably not get much, if any, additional local revenue, and we still have an additional 2% raise that we have to do to be able to get to $50,000, which is our state minimum. We already talked about MMC may withdraw from Cigna. That could create out-of-network charges for employees as well. And then that last one, TriStar, is the impact for broad plans P and open access, since it's not covered for the narrow plans. Then you get to the rate charts. So let me kind of go over what you'll see on these rate charts. The first one is your local access. And so this is, you'll see beside Rutherford County Schools, 10 months, Blue Cross Blue Shield and Cigna, S, Local Plus. So this is your more narrow. This is the one that would not include TriStar. You'll see you have your 4 tiers, and Premier, Standard, Limited, and then, sorry, let me get through to that one. And then your local CDHP and HSA. You'll see the 2024 is the current contribution. The employee, I'm going to look at Premier, PPO, and employee only. It goes from $171.12 to, if we do the buy-up, it goes to $181.20. So it is not that big of a difference because we're covering 20% overall increase. I'm looking at the second column on scenario 1. If you go to the second column under scenario 2, that number goes from $171.12 to $211.44. So it's a bigger increase, but again, that's because we are doing a 20% increase overall and still continuing to pay more for people that choose that higher plan. Caveat again being the higher plan is the only one that includes the North End TriStar and Stonecrest. If you go to the next one, page, this is where you'll see big jumps, because this is where in scenario 2, people are basically having to pay up. Sorry, scenario 1, they're having to pay up. So this is for somebody that's on open access right now, so they chose the top of the line. They're on, it's $189.12 for an employee only Premier, the second number $189.12. Under scenario 1, to where you now have to pay up, whoops, went too far. You would then be at $256.46 per month. So it is an increase because you're paying for that more Premier coverage. If we cover 20% of everybody, you'll see it decreases to $229.44. So it's still a bigger increase, but it is not as big of an increase because you're not asking people to pay up for the plan that they need. Where it starts to, if you look at like I'll just use myself as an example, employee, spouse, and children, 480.46 is current, and then it'll, I'm on that Premier PPO, the very bottom one, 480.48, and then the employee will go to 626.96 if you have to pay up. If you don't pay up, you'll go to 585.12, where it's 20% of the overall increase. What I still want to point out, though, is how much RCS is paying. Being someone who has been in a different district from on the state plans, there are some districts who truly say we are paying $756.48 for every plan, and it doesn't matter if you're a family, individual or not, you are paying the difference. And that happens in a lot of rural districts, and even in some not rural districts. So We definitely are paying substantially for medical insurance, which helps us get employees. But that's kind of where we are now. The board has those really two options of, do we want to cover 20% for everybody? Or do we want to have the people pay up that need the Premier plan, but understanding that does hurt the TriStar one? Happy to answer questions. Or Mr. Vaughn, you said on the committee, anything you wanted to add, or staff?
I tell you, I'd just like to say, Mr. Sears, the committee, it was just, those folks work really, really hard on this. And come out of those meetings together, it just, you know, numbers and things that necessary. There's two ways to talk about which help. But yeah, they work hard, and I see that they're dedicated and very committed to doing this. And it's sort of a thankless job. Boy, they did a good job. It was great.
Dr. Sullivan, do you know when we're paying roughly the 81% of however much they're spending, like over the whole?
Over the whole plan, and you'll see those percentages a little bit different. If you look at, like, we will pay less of a percentage, I'm on the very last page, for people that are going to buy up. If you're on that high Premier and open access, we're only paying 75%. But if you look down at some of the local CDHP, it's 87, 85, 83, and on the one before that, you'll see it's 80-20, there's one that's 91-9. It's just the 81% overall.
So I think I had asked the gentleman that was here at our meeting about the insurance, about potentially, and maybe not for this one, but maybe going forward as, you know, budget things come up, kind of a flat fee thing. And I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to look at trying to keep our 81% of our employees and maybe lessening the percentage for the dependents if we get to a place where we have to kind of adjust. I'm happy to see that we were able to find some money to contribute towards it this year. I am still a little concerned about the whole North End issue, just because if their only option for their closest hospital is on that Premier plan, that's almost like punishing the people that live and work on the North End, which is a little frustrating. I just don't know if there's any way around that.
Ms. Maxwell? All right, so just to kind of reiterate to make sure understanding well here, if we go with scenario one, then it requires the employee to pay up for the premium. And then we go with scenario two, but that scenario one is going to have the long-term effects of it are not as severe on the district as scenario two. Whereas scenario two kind of continues what we've already been doing, but will increase the cost moving forward because it's a reoccurring cost. Right. And how much of the cost did you say our budget, it eats up of our budget?
Just under 10%. And
just
so
under
it's
10%.
55 million. Our budget this year was 549. And so it is 9.91, roughly, top of my, somewhere around there. It's
for me, I'm just looking at it from a couple different scenarios, but typically I find that you'll get a base plan with an employer, and then you have the option, they'll offer you other options that you can choose to pay up for. I think that's more similar to what we have been offering, and just considering the budgetary needs, that's kind of where I land. I do concur with Ms. Darby about the frustrations of what's in network and out of network, but as you mentioned about MMC, I mean, that could be a whole nother thing that's going on. Unfortunately, we don't get to choose that. That's the sad part.
I think the biggest thing, just for those that don't know about the North End, is that Stonecrest is our only option for a hospital, versus Murfreesboro has a couple options. So we're going into this knowing that Stonecrest is not part of the other plan, and knowing that that is their only option on the North End. So that's just a little concerning to me for those families and employees that live out that way.
I had heard rumor that Vanderbilt was going to try to put in a hospital off of 840, and I know it It got denied, okay.
multiple times. Would have been great, got denied.
I was hoping that might be.
If you don't-
Vanderbilt is back on, in the plan, correct?
I thought they were.
Last year they weren't, but they came back in, right?
Not sure, or where that is in litigation right now.
Okay, okay.
The other point I would like to bring up is last year we talked as a board, we're at about 83% salary and benefits. We're probably closer to 85 or 86% now. Like this coming year, insurance is an issue. We know transportation is going to be an issue. We have already cut our textbook line down to $2 million that we only did growth. We don't have anything budgeted for the next textbook adoption. We've moved high school to being the only ones that are one-to-one with computers, so that only has $400,000. Like there's people are the next thing to cut, and so that's truly where we are.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you for explaining that. Next, we go to legal.
All right, legal tab 4, out-of-county transfer student. The board's been requested to admit a transfer student from another school system under discipline. The student was expelled for possession or use of drugs. You have the entire file with you, or you can talk to Ms. Ridley as well. I think she's emailed everybody. According to policy 6.318, the board may deny admissions of any student except those in state custody when a student transfers from another school system while under suspension or expulsion. Director of Schools' recommendation is to deny.
Next, we have engineering and construction.
2, first, we have request for Siegel Middle softball batting cages. Principal Kim Stoker is requesting to install a 45 by 65 foot batting cage area for the softball team. The estimated cost for this project is $48,000. It will be at no cost to the school or school board. All materials and labor are being donated by a local business. This area has been known to flood periodically in the past, and engineering does not believe it will make the problem worse. It could, however, be underwater at some time. Engineering Construction has reviewed the request and has no objection. Would this require a permit from the city as well? Yes, probably, maybe. We don't have to answer that, never mind.
It's on the edge.
Okay. Okay. Next, we have number 2, request for home computer campus school Gaga ball pit.
They've requested a Gaga ball pit, so kind of like dodgeball in a little hexagon. So Principal Sherry King is requesting to install a Gaga ball pit on their playground. The estimated cost for this project is $4,000. Will be at no cost to the school board. All materials are already in hand and paid for. The labor is being donated by a local business and funded through the PTA. Engineering Instruction has reviewed the request and has no objection if MTSU approves the addition as well. Thank you, Dr. King, for being here. It's just one of the Gaga ball. It's just one of those things that continues to.
We do have MTSU's approval.
I was going
They're
to ask the
okay.
same thing. Okay, wonderful.
Again, ignorance, what is, when I grew up, I didn't have a Gaga ball, what is it?
It is a, best way, it's like a, I don't know if it's a hexagon or an octagon. I don't remember how many sides it has on it. It's got 6. Yeah, so we got our new
It's a
Olympic
Gaga.
sport over there.
He's a Gaga specialist.
James? That's
So
what
it's like,
I just said 6. I wasn't trying to be a whatever. I just said 6.
No,
so it's like dodgeball?
kind of, but underhanded, and then it's yes,
Okay,
but much more intense in a much smaller space.
okay.
It's a shame Dr. Mr. Evans not going to be here Thursday night.
No, he could
give us
demonstrate
a
it.
Exhibition of what Gaga ball is.
I don't think that's a great idea.
It's the new thing, because you're going to get one again on October the 1st. So you're going to get more of these requests for this sport.
Okay.
Mr. Vaughn, did y'all ever play Gaga ball out there last kid?
Heard of it before.
I thought pickleball would be next.
Thank y'all. And next, we move to number 13, library book review.
So the final decision's due by September 19th, 2024, so that's Thursday for the titles below. Mr. Reed, I don't know the best way to go about doing this on Thursday. This will be our first time kind of going through this. As a reminder, these were challenged under the obscenity law, not challenged through the Age Appropriate Materials Act, and so that is a little bit different of a process. You have any suggestions?
Which added a age-appropriate criteria to library book materials. And under that new statute, the board was required to adopt a policy and procedures to evaluate library books. And basically, under that new procedure, you're required by state law to determine whether or not the library books are age appropriate for the students who have access to those books. So that is the procedure that was established under this new chapter 782. Aside of that, you have other laws that affect books in the library. One of which is the owed obscenity law, which we've had on the books for a long time, that says if books are obscene, then they should be removed from school libraries. And I think that's really the initial issue the board, I think, is looking at with respect to these books coming before you now, determine whether or not these books are obscene, or whether you determine they're age appropriate or not, or whatever kind of restricted access you want to put on the books. With respect to determining whether something is obscene, we have a statutory definition of that in Tennessee. So there's a law that gives you that criteria for what something is obscene or not. And that is 3917-901. And there's basically 3 requirements for something to be obscene in Tennessee. And those 3 requirements are the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to a prurient interest. Secondly, the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct, and the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So for a book to be determined to be obscene under Tennessee statute, all 3 of those criteria must be met. So that will be a decision of the board in evaluating these books, of whether the books at issue meet those 3 criteria. Aside from that, you also have to determine whether or not, if you determine it's not obscene, but maybe not age appropriate for everyone. I'm sorry. So if you determine it's not age appropriate for everyone who has access to the book at school, you may have to put some restrictions on the book. By statute, if you determine it's obscene, you have to remove the book. So if this group determines that a book is obscene and meets those definitions of obscenity, you have to remove the book under the current statutes. If you determine that a book is not necessarily obscene, but may not be age appropriate for everyone who has access to it, then in that case, you have to take action to either remove the book so that the kids who are not of appropriate age do not have access to it, or impose some other restrictions on it. The way the law reads, if you take no action on these books within 60 days of when the complaint came in, then at that point, it gets referred on to the state textbook commission for them to take action on it if they deem it to be appropriate. So really, the decision of the board that will be coming up is whether you determine the books to be obscene or not. That will be one determination if someone wants to make a motion to that effect. And if they are determined to be obscene, they would have to be removed from all the libraries in the county. The other option is if you determine they're not age appropriate, then you have to place age appropriate restrictions on those books and restrict the access as you determine appropriate. So all those options are on the table. You also have the option of doing nothing with it. And if you do nothing, it goes on to the state. So those are kind of your options with respect to the books.
Any questions, comments?
I think the state textbook commission, whatever their official name is, has some disagreements on how it gets to them. I believe there's some disagreement under challenges under the insanity law, whether or not that actually makes it to them or not. So that's just something that we have heard, that they don't view, it's only the official complainant that can challenge it to them.
Can you, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, so I guess 2 years ago, the textbook commission, whatever their official title is, was charged with reviewing appeals that got to them. We have some conversation around how does a book actually get to them, and it's not through the board chose not to do anything. It was more of the original complainant would have to send it to them. And so that brings this one into unique situation based on the complainant.
Yes, Mr. Tidwell.
I would like to address a few things. One, I know that we all received a letter from the ACLU, and that was just a threat letter. I'd like to go over a few things that they mentioned here and kind of give some clarification to that. One, they obviously made some references to First Amendment rights for students. Two, they talked about the PICO decision and that we can't remove books because you don't like the idea. So if you're making a decision based on political ideologies, or discrimination or something like that. If you don't like the topic, you can't remove the book. Can't remove for merely just mentioning, you know what, before I say this next word, I personally don't think this is a conversation. I don't know how much of this content is going to get brought out in public, so I'd just like to disclose to anybody watching that if content does get brought out to the public, I don't think this is a discussion, in my opinion, for minors. So that's a heads up on that. But can't remove from merely mentioning sex. And they also said that we should return all the previously considered books back to the library. So I would just like to address a few of those things. One, we'll start off with the First Amendment violations. So it's not a First Amendment violation according to Supreme Court case law. PICO versus Board of Education said the selection of content in K through 12 schools is not a suppression of First Amendment freedom of expression. There exists no right to have certain materials available in K through 12 schools. The selection of certain materials over other materials is not a First Amendment suppression of free speech. K through 12 schools make many decisions to limit content, which courses to teach and not teach, which books to purchase or not, etc. There is no suggestion that K through 12 schools have to purchase any particular book. To go a little bit further with the PICO versus Board of Education in 1982, though not all justices agreed, all the justices of the court in PICO versus Board of Education did acknowledge that the school board has the authority to remove books that are vulgar as interpreted in the Bethel School District versus Fraser case in 1986, which they referred back to PICO. Tinker versus Des Moines, the Supreme Court acknowledged that non-disruptive student speech is protected due to the ruling in Tinker, but the court made an exception to the rule that allows schools to prohibit speech that is sexually vulgar or lewd. The mere mention of sex is not what we're talking about today. The content will show that the sexual content in these books is sexually explicit, therefore violating state law. Consistent with Supreme Court cases cited above, the U.S. Court of Appeals upheld a school district's right to remove content that is lewd or sexually explicit, and that was in 2011, RO versus Ithaca City School District. They defined lewd as inciting to sensual desire or imagination. So, your threat letter that you got from the ACLU, they obviously left a lot of context out because I feel like they're trying to push a certain direction. However, you're not violating First Amendment's rights. You are doing what it was set up for you to do. And if you'll read any of these cases, what you'll find out is that the Supreme Court has decided that the people closest to what those community values are and what those community values should look like is the elected officials. And they have said that the school board, out of the elected officials possible, are the closest to that community because they were elected by the community. So the buck stops here. That is the conclusion. There are two things that are, and I'll make one quick mention. He made a referral to, Mr. Reed, made a referral to the Miller test, and that, of course, that is part of it. But I'd like to turn your attention as well to TCA 49-63803. This is the collection, review, policy adoption, evaluation, and removal effective July 1st, 2024. I'm going to read you subset 1. In whole or in part, all right, for the purposes of this section, we'll start at B. For the purposes of this section, a material that, 1, in whole or in part, contains nudity or descriptions or depictions of sexual excitement, sexual conduct, excess violence, or abuse as those terms are defined in 39-17-901, is not appropriate for the age or maturity level of a student in any of the grades K through 12 and must not be maintained in a school's library collection. All that to say that there have been lots of opinions on this particular subject, and I understand that. I understand that there is some subjectiveness. However, there is a line, and our job is to find out where that line is. I think that in the discussions that I've had with those that have been opposed to removing the books, or certainly those that have been for removing the books, the difference maker is almost always the content, not the topic, not the surrounding story, but for the argument of sexually explicit material, it is the content. And so, since I don't know that everybody has availability to that content, there was a website that was created, bookreviewrc.com. All that does is that just shows you the content of the books that we're reviewing and how we arrived at this position so that everybody can be made aware of what that looks like. I don't know how much of that content is going to get read in this board meeting or at this work session or at the upcoming board meeting. But I at least encourage all the board members to review that content, and I wanted to make the board aware that your decision today based on, not today, I'm sorry, at the board meeting on Thursday, your decision on this particular topic, in my opinion, as to why it was brought to the board, is on the basis of sexually explicit content, not age appropriateness. That's separate. There's a line that's crossed. I believe that line was crossed in all 7 of these books, and I'm willing to make that case. Once the line's crossed, as I just read you to the law, the letter of the law, we should remove the books. If the line wasn't crossed, then now you're talking about age appropriate, and then you're dealing with a lot of different things. The focus of how these books at least arrived through the channels in which they have arrived to this meeting today, in my opinion, has been specifically and completely on the topic of sexually explicit content in violation of the law. And I'd be happy to carry on further, but I feel like I've talked enough.
Ask a question, Mr. Reed. So of course, part of my job as director is whatever the board decides is what we of course will do, but I also have to look out for risk and discuss those things. One of the questions that we get stuck a lot with is the TCA 49 you references the definitions in TCA 3917-901. And in TCA 3917-901, the Miller test that Mr. Reed described is listed. So I get stuck in the which part do I follow? The law is referencing TCA, says remove it, says remove based on the definitions in 901, and then the Miller test is listed in 901. And so I have no idea which direction to go, Mr. Reed.
Well, that's going to ultimately be a board decision. So the board's going to have to give you direction on what, interpreting what the laws are and what the board's will is with respect to these books. So ultimately, the school system's role will be fulfilling the decision of the board with respect to the book.
That's great, thank you.
I got one comment about that. You know, everybody that's, I guess, watching tonight and everything, everybody gets bent out of shape about these books. The thing about it is, these books, I'd say everybody every student that I know of in middle and high school have their own cell phones. And the access they have to what they have access to is tremendously greater than anything in these books. And, you know, if parents are really concerned about this, and hey, I agree, but I say also too, you better take your cell phones and take them down to the junkyard and get your money back if you can. Because those kids, I'm telling you, the access they have, and you may think your darling is the sweetest, kindest, purest child in the world. But kids are inquisitive. And if they don't know, they're going to try to find out. If you don't tell them, somebody else will. So And another thing too, I've talked to a lot of the librarians in the county. Mr. Vaught and I have talked to quite a few, and I've called the ones that I've worked with over the years. And, you know, these books are not checked out. I mean, you know, we're making a big deal out of books that, gosh, kids not interested in. They don't check them out. I mean, you look and talk to them. Beloved is required for an AP course. So really, you know, because of that, you know, we don't design the AP courses. But if we're going to give a kid credit for that, we got to go by their guidelines. And that means that you got to let them read Beloved. So that's just my 2 cents.
Anyone else?
Ms. Maxwell?
Yes.
I appreciate that from Mr. Butch. A couple things there that was mentioned was, yes, kids do have access. That's why removing school library books is not book banning in any form of the sense of the word. The books are available for free at your free public libraries through publishers, or they can purchase online or other retailers. So they have access to these books. That's just not, if a parent lets their child go see an R-rated movie, that's a deal for the parent. We're not showing R-rated movies here at the school district. So there is a difference. As far as Beloved being on the AP list, there are, I don't know, 50 to 100 books on the AP list that they get to choose from, the teachers get to choose from. It's an interesting discussion as to whether a book, if it violates sexually explicit material, whether that should be overlooked, even though there are lots of other options and tons of other books, and even covering the same topics, whether that should be overlooked just simply because they made it to an AP list. I disagree. It's not required unless the teacher, the AP, chooses that book to make it a requirement, but it isn't. There's tons of options for them to choose from. So I don't think that's enough. The fact that they are or are not getting checked out, which when I was looking through a lot of these books they have been checked out, but to say that they're not getting checked out would just further the argument that there, again, is no need for them to take up space, especially under the ideal that they have sexually explicit content in them.
Anything else? I do believe that this is an important thing for us to do on Thursday, and I want to be fair to everyone. We will have a roll call vote, and we will vote on each of one of these individually. And all I ask is that regardless of what happens, that we as a board come back together and we can move past this and we get on to other things we've got, because we've got a lot of things on our plate right now. This books, hopefully, we can come to an agreement that works for everyone on Thursday. But I just ask that everybody come Thursday and vote with their conscience, vote with their heart, but we're going to be fair, and everyone that wants to get heard will be heard on Thursday as well. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Vaught.
Well, since I'm a new kid on the block, please indulge me just a second if you can. You mentioned that there have been other books that have been removed. How many books have been removed?
Give me just a second.
No, it's just not technical. I mean, are we talking 5 or 500? I mean, just give me the ballpark.
Neither. Dr. Chastain? I can pull it up on the website.
Yeah, it's on the library services page, and
Okay.
it's somewhere between 15 and 20. I believe
Well,
it's around
that's
17.
that's public knowledge, the books that have been removed. Over what period of time?
I think it's closer to 30.
Last year? Since, well,
February 21st of this year it began.
that's when the book removal started, okay? And it's based off of
State law.
the previous law. Tennessee Code Annotated, the school board law, or the decency law?
That's the TCA law, the basis for those getting removed, yes.
So you'll notice if you go to our website, we had 4 official challenges through the Age Appropriate Materials Act, and we had one of those retained at the middle school level, 1 retained at the high school level only, 1 retained overall, and then 1 was placed in high school only. So those were the 4 that we had challenged through that. And then we had 30 challenged through obscenity, which was a different avenue that I don't know is happening everywhere else.
Right.
So it puts us in a weird position. Normally, a director of schools can call and ask, how's your district dealing with this? And I don't have that option right now. I don't know of anyone else that is facing it through that avenue.
All right, I'm gonna back up a step further. How are books chosen in our libraries? Is there a magic list somewhere, or just, I mean?
No, we go.
Somebody has made a decision. I guess what I'm trying to get somebody to tell me, and I apologize because I haven't quite read our entire policy manual yet. I assume, and I get in trouble when I assume things, Dr. Sullivan, that there is a policy that governs our libraries.
And the overall review of library materials, we have put a procedure in place in the last year that goes with the selection of library materials.
Okay.
Before that, you had, the question always came up, how did some of this content honestly didn't need to be in our libraries, and our media specialists, when we notified them about, removed some of that material. Some of it was just blatantly not for high school age students. You had, under about a decade ago, you had the whole purchase under a different umbrella, and sexual content got added that way.
Okay, all right. So I guess you go back to the new schools that are opened up, I'm sure there's X number of dollars appropriated. Somebody makes a suggestion, either they copy what Oakland and Riverdale had when they opened Siegel or whatever,
Yeah.
right? I mean, somebody has been through these processes over the last 50 years. And that's what I'm trying to get to. So there are choices made. Or the library specialist, the media specialists, are they the ones that do it? Or is that curriculum-based? Is central office helping with that? How is this done? I guess what I'm getting back to, the concern I would have, that I think a parent would have, do you have a renegade person in the system that decides they want to put something out there that maybe doesn't align with the community values, as Caleb is referring to? I think that's the thing that I would be concerned about. Right? Wrong? Y'all are having a discussion.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Sharp. Talk, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, because of Plainview, because I've researched this. When Plainview opened, I went out to Plainview, and they get X amount of money per student, X amount of dollars per student. When they go to look at the books, there's a box that says $20,000, $25,000, or something like that. Whatever money they have to spend, that's the box that they get. Now, what goes into the box depends on, from what I understand, depends on who they're getting the books from.
The book salesman.
Yeah, the book salesman.
Right.
And so, but they're books that they put in there, the standards, the classics and things like that, but there's also books that are thrown in there for free that may have been on the New York Times bestseller list, some way they get thrown in there. So, look, our librarians don't have time to read all of the books that come in. If they're well-seasoned librarians, they've probably read most of the books, but if you have someone who's new on the job, I don't think any of us up here think that there's a renegade that's in there pulling books. It's simply kind of anymore. There's not a lot of you go in and pick all your books out. It's a box, literally, with books in it, and they fill up the library. So if one of the books that we got that maybe made it to the list, it may have been one of the books that was free. that no one chose it. It was just thrown in the books. And so then every year after that, there's another stipend for each child. And a lot of the librarians will go to, the special needs department and ask if they need a certain book for their special needs, or they'll ask, for history or something like that. If they have more money, they'll go to certain teachers and say, do you need a book? So I don't think there's any of us up here that think that we have a renegade person. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I do want to correct just a few things that we've put into place. So on that same library services page, there is an entire procedure that dictates how we choose books. And we take that very seriously. Would you agree? And we have put into place in the last 12 months a very detailed procedure in how we annually review those books. This process is part of that. Obviously, we will continue to hear from our community, but that is something that we as a curriculum and instruction department do take extremely seriously. And when concerns arise from the community, that is our job to hear those, and we do. But please take a look at the procedures that are in place in terms of how those books are chosen. It is not flippant at all, and we do not, to my knowledge, take entire boxes and just put them on the shelves. So there is a very detailed process in which our librarians have been asked, at least within the last 12 months, to review those books, and it is our job to know what's on the shelves.
So there is a process. We do have processes in place.
That we continue to revisit based on making sure that the students in our schools both have materials that are age appropriate, but also give them views to the world. So that is something, again, we take extremely seriously. That process is on that library services page. I highly recommend everybody looking at that. That is what is guiding our development of the collections within our schools.
So there is a process in place that if a parent had a concern about a book and brought it to the librarian for,
And
it walks up the chain.
absolutely, and our librarians, as our administrators, as is our entire department, are consistently and always open to hearing from parents if there is a concern for their particular child or at large. That reconsideration and materials request link has been on our website since its creation. Before that, informal processes also existed. So it is our job to listen to our community, and we certainly do that, which is reflected in the process that our librarians follow every single day.
Mr. Vaughn referenced, he and I have made a commitment, I guess, to ourselves to, again, being the new members of the board, to visit each school. Hopefully we'll catch all of them between now and Christmas. That's our goal. But we have chosen to start with the high schools, just because they're bigger and there's a lot more going on and that kind of stuff. And it's been an interesting conversation. I think we have specifically talked to every librarian at every school we visited so far, and it's interesting dialogue with the employees, or these people take this stuff serious. It's kind of not amazing to me, but very, very comforting to me that each one of them had a love for books, had a love for literature, loved to talk about literature, different facets of literature. And it was, like I said, very refreshing, very eye-opening. I think, hey, I'd hire every one of them again, Dr. Sullivan. They're A-okay in my book. But which leads me back to this question then. So we have these processes in place. Explain to me how, so these books got to us. Why? Through the decency, is that what it is? Because somebody brought them up, somebody?
Yes, through the obscenity law.
Through the obscenity law, okay. I don't know, I have a concern, I guess I have a concern that we have these processes in place and these books didn't go through this process. If I'm understanding, am I understanding that correctly? That this has come from somebody?
I think there's a vagueness to how something can be challenged. We're across the state, all that I've heard of are challenges using the official reconsideration of library materials.
Okay. Are these in every library we have? Which libraries are they in?
Each book's a little bit different.
Okay, so this is not a standard, every book, I mean, what is it? Wicked is not in every high school library right now.
If you give me just a second, I can look.
I'm picking, I know, but I'm just curious. Y'all are.
I had a feeling that would come up, so I asked, so.
Right.
Wicked is in, it looks like it's in all of them. Eagleville, Holloway, Riverdale, Rocky Fork Middle, Smyrna High, Stewart's Creek High, Siegel High, Blackman High, Rockville High, Smyrna West, Laverne High, Oakland High.
I was just curious, the reason I'm asking which libraries, and I'm sorry to bore everybody with this question, but I'm trying to figure out at what time were these books, like if they had been in Oakland and Riverdale, they'd been around for 40 years. I understand it. If they were recent orders or something like that, if there is a problem, let's kind of address what the problem is. Was it time an issue? Was it a book salesman? How do we get to where we are right now?
I was wrong. I read you the wrong group.
Okay.
Wicked is Riverdale, Siegel High, and Stewart's Creek. It has been out since 2009, so you're looking 15 years in those three schools.
Okay. And Caleb, was it you that brought them to the board? Who was it brought them to the board? You brought them to the board?
Yes, sir.
All right, then I'm gonna let me ask you a question. This is gonna sound like I'm attacking you, and I'm not. And I don't mean it this way. But how is this not suppression?
I can tell you exactly how it's not suppression.
Okay, help me with that.
Well, I covered that earlier, but I'll say it again, that it's not suppression because these books are readily available at other places and other sources. So they're not being taken out because you don't like the content, at least not in my perspective, and I would hope nobody here would do the same. But it's not because they don't like the content or anything like that. It's strictly because of the sexually explicit content. So that's why I always push people to the content. There were some prior board members that disagreed with me on this particular topic. However, when we shared the content with them, some of those board members were in agreement with the removal process. So the issue is they're still completely available at your public library. They're available online. They're available for you to purchase. However, whether or not they are sexually explicit is what we're discussing now. So there's no violation of rights. But I'd like to tap on one more thing if I can. Is that okay? The review process. You're asking a lot of questions about the review process, and I had some questions about that too. So I went and met with some of our librarians over the past 2 weeks and had them kind of walk me through the review process. So what that looked like I only did the high school level, so I can't speak to anything else. But on the high school level, what that looked like is most of the book purchases come from Ingram, Follett, and I think the Junior Libraries Guild. Is that right? Am I saying that right? Okay, Junior Libraries Guild. And so they'll pull up a book and have different sources for how they come up to a book or whatever. And these are people, like you mentioned, that are taking this pretty seriously, I'm assuming. And they'll look into it. And what they'll do, of course, they're not reading the whole book. What they're doing is they're scrolling down, they're saying, okay, well, what does the publisher recommend? Like what age should they recommend? They may say 15 and up or 16 and up, and they may have little tags in there that say this deals with some kind of historical context, or this deals with this particular item over here, or certain topics, to kind of give them an idea, right? So because they may be aiming to fill fantasy novels or something like that. They may be aiming to fill that gap, and so they're starting with that tag, and they're kind of scrolling through. And then what they'll do, the ones that showed me, so I'm just based off that information, what they'll do, they'll scroll down to the bottom. At the bottom of some of these pages, I think it was either Ingram that we looked at, might have been Follett. But anyways, we'll scroll down to the bottom of it, and there's usually 3 or 4 reviews from different librarian journals, articles surrounding that based on this book. And so that's kind of the review process. But, and I want to make this clear, I'm not blaming our librarians for this stuff being in here. There's no possible way they could read all the content. And they read a lot of books, but there's just no possible way. We did the math on one particular school, and I'm not going to mention any names because I don't know if they want me to mention them or not. But we did the math on one particular school, and they ordered 450 books for their high school. And as we scrolled through it, in the time frame they had to order, in the time frame they would have to read them on top of the stuff they're already doing, including tech now. They do tech as well, take care of our laptops, which is kind of that's a different discussion. But on top of that, there's no way for them to come through it. And so I let these librarians know. I'm not blaming the librarians for bringing in the content. Like Ms. Sharp mentioned, I don't know that there are rogue librarians just trying to sneak in. I don't think that's the case. But they're making these decisions based off these other librarian journals or other reviews, and some of that stuff has slipped in. So what we're catching, or parents are catching, or other individuals are catching on the back end is that this is in our libraries. And there's plenty of examples of that. I still think the best way to show you what has been in our libraries before it got removed is to go to that website and look at it just gives you excerpts of some of the books that have been removed, and you can kind of judge from yourself whether that was appropriate and whether it met, not whether it was appropriate, whether it met the definition of sexually explicit. So that's kind of how the process plays out.
The reason, okay, so it comes back to sexually explicit.
This discussion, yes.
This discussion does. So do we not, so this is high school, right? These are...
All of these, I think, are primarily high school.
These are 14 to 18-year-old young people.
Correct.
So we're trying to avoid the subject of sex with them? Is that what, I mean, help me understand why it's not there. Why would you not, I get having the section where you got to have parental consent. I would agree with that 100%. Kind of like an R-rated movie. You brought that up earlier.
Sure.
That there's a rating system in these books. And from a literary standpoint, yes. I think making a statement to this community, yes. If I as a parent want to allow my child to check that book out, then that's fine. But if you don't, then that's fine too. Why would you not do it that way as opposed to just removing the book? That's where I'm trying to, I'm not...
Sure.
It's like you cannot legislate morality nor decency. I've learned that in my 62 years now. There's a lot of things you and we find disgusting in our communities. I do. I know you do too. But us trying to police everything and everybody, that's inconceivable. And so avoiding a subject a lot of times brings attention to that subject. And so I'm looking at it as an opportunity for families to have a discussion if they need to have that discussion. But again, I'm not telling them to have the discussion. I'm not telling them to check the book out. But why would I want to take that opportunity away from somebody to have that dialogue with their child?
That's great. If they want to have that dialogue with their child, they can certainly have it at home, which is where it is suitable for them to have that dialogue. The question is, and what you're drawing attention to, is where is the line? And until you read the content, you can't make a decision on where that line is. So once you see the content, then you make a justification for it being in our libraries, whether it's sexually explicit content or not. I mean, my first reply would be, do you think sexually explicit content, not the mention of the word sex, not the portrayal of a rape scene, but actually sexually explicit content, romance novel type stuff, maybe smut considered to some. Is that appropriate for schools?
Are you asking me?
I'm saying
generally. I don't know.
Okay.
Everybody, to each his own right here. I guess that's...
This is the own, though.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. This is where the buck stops.
Well, the buck stops, but I would rather err to the side of free speech and free expression than I would to mandate how somebody reads books or what books they have read. So I could go so far the other argument with it and say, well, why do we even have books? You made an articulate discussion earlier that any of these books, you can get them online, you can buy them anywhere. Mr. Vaughn pointed out There's a lot worse stuff on our telephones that kids have right now. So why do we even have any books? Why do we even have a library?
So if something exists,
I'm sounding like a smart aleck there when I say that.
Yeah.
But, you know, let's go back. Why do we have a library?
to discuss the topics that are for education, right? So I mean, isn't that the primary focus of education?
Yes, and is not maturity part of that education?
Certainly is, but would you agree that we should possibly have, say, Playboys on our shelves? And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that first.
In schools?
Why not?
The boys have got them at the,
Discussion right there.
the boys have got them in the barn. I mean,
Yeah.
you might as well, you know, you know.
So there's a line, and so we're trying to figure out that line, and I think the content helps determine that line.
Okay.
Does the state have a list of acceptable library books?
No, and they never will provide one because they don't want to get involved in the litigation.
Ms. Darby has her hand up.
I just want to say, I don't think anyone on the board is taking these decisions lightly. There is, from what I've perceived from some people, a misperception as to the content in which is being discussed a lot of times, including my own father at one point, who I had to share some content with to get him to understand what was being discussed. I think it's important as a board whose primary focus is for the education of our children and minors to make sure that we are looking at the task at hand. This isn't about if they have access to worse things, then this is fine. Well, they have access to lots of things in the world. It doesn't mean that the school system is responsible for providing those things. And I obviously want our kids to have things that they can relate to, things that they're interested in their hobbies. We don't just strictly want books on, math and science only, but I do think it's important that we make sure that what we are providing does have an appropriate content. There's no judgment involved, at least not on my end. As far as parents are concerned, those are your children. If you would like to provide them with different things to read that have certain types of content, that is certainly your right, and I would never challenge anybody on that. I think the question is, when it comes down to what our role is as a school system, where do we draw the line on what we are using taxpayer funds and what we are willing to provide to those minors? We're talking about children, most of whom cannot vote, cannot join the military, can't buy cigarettes, can't buy alcohol. So society in general has a line somewhere for certain things. And I would recommend to anybody, if you have not looked at some of the content that has been removed or some of the content that is in question, please go look at it, because we are not talking to two people laying in a bed making love. It doesn't end there. It goes well beyond that, and some of it into quite graphic depiction that our school system would never show a movie about, would never read aloud to these children, and in some cases, some people would question the legality of giving that information to a minor. So I just think it's important that we stay on what the topic is, which is our job as a school system. When we look at the law, should these be provided by the school system with taxpayer money, and do they meet that definition of obscenity? That is what we are being asked currently about these particular 7 books. And I think it's important that we remember that is what we're being asked. Does this meet the state standard under obscenity law? Does it need to be removed? Does it not? And I think that's a personal. We were given some definition this year, which I think definitely helps. And there's still going to be some room in there as to what people think go under those definitions. But if you haven't looked at the content, then you can't even make that decision whether something falls under those definitions or not. So I would encourage anybody that is interested in this topic to go look at the content.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Ball.
You know, gosh, you know, if we continue on with this discussion, sooner or later, you know, if you hadn't looked at a biology book lately, I mean, it's a lot of this same stuff. It's explicit in biology classes. And, you know, we've got the best librarians anywhere. I mean, the ones I've worked with that know, there are none any better. And Mr. Vaughn, I've talked to them, and I'm telling you, they have spent a tremendous amount of time going over the list of books and the books that they have. And again, you know, there's certain books, and if they feel like each one of them, if they feel like it's inappropriate, they take that book off the shelf, or they may put it in an isolated place where kids, without parent permission, couldn't read it. And so, you know, I have a problem with banning books, because I'm like Mr. Vaught, that, you know, the freedom, you know, all that, the freedom of speech and stuff, and I don't know, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of banning books, because I'm telling you what's going to happen. Sooner or later, we're going to have to come up, and the Bible's going to be challenged. Because of the violence, some of the things in the Bible, you know, there's people out there that would challenge it. And personally, I just don't want to get in the book banning business. I mean, I trust our librarians with everything I've got, because I know their integrity and everything about them. And again, they either don't put them on the shelf, they take them off the shelf and isolate them. And I think they do a great job with that. And, you know, I just, we spent more time on these 7 books, and we've got so many bigger fish to fry in this school system. I want to be able to get this thing over with and move on, because we got a bunch of decisions ahead of us.
Mr. Tipley?
Yes, I certainly don't think there's any comparison between a biology book and the sexually explicit content in these books. It sounds as though that hasn't been as thoroughly reviewed, and I think that would make a definite change in the determination of your decision, which, not your decision, but the board's decision as a whole, as to whether or not we're going to allow sexually explicit material, which is different than a biology book, into our schools, and be okay with it. Because that decision, of course, is going to be recorded, and it reflects the community, and it reflects what we have here. So there's certainly a difference there. As I've already mentioned, I mean, I covered a lot of this in the opening, but this is not book banning. I mean, it's not book banning. So unless you are getting rid of all the books in all the county and all access, it is not. They still have access to it. The focus here is education, and whether or not these books are sexually explicit. If they are, they should be removed according to the law, which has been gone over as well. So we're going to have as much discussion as you guys would like to have on it, but I know we have a vote coming up Thursday, and I'm sure there will be much more discussion then.
Anyone else like to add anything? If not, we'll go on to insurance, but you already took.
I can do another riveting rendition of the insurance review if anybody would like.
It was quite riveting.
Oh, what a shame.
And financial report will be Thursday.
Correct.
Director's update.
We'll do most of it on Thursday. We did a school safety video today, so just as most of the country is facing the amount of threats that have not been substantiated, we are disciplining students as they are credible threats. That's kind of the stance we've taken. I don't feel like it is my position or any of our staff's position to determine whether or not a threat is credible or not, unless it just seems truly ridiculous. If somebody posts something, reposts it, those are things that we have to take as credible threats. And so that is how we are dealing with it. I want to thank our team because it has been absolute nonstop with Patty. I don't think she's in here, but our partnership with the SROs, the Sheriff's Department, with Kay, James, legal, just about everybody. It is nonstop, usually going till 11:30 or 12 at night, and it starts back usually at 2:30 or 3 in the morning. And so if we look tired, we are tired because every one of these threats we deal with, and it is almost 2 full weeks we have on our whiteboard where we're just kind of in our conference room where we're tracking all of them just so that we can keep up with all of them. And we are disciplining them to the full extent possible to make sure that kids know that this is serious and that the only way we can protect our students is when we investigate all of them. And it's terrifying to think that you don't want to get to that boy who cried wolf scenario to where we continue to worry and then we just lose our, this isn't real, and then something terrible happens. But that is our number one goal, to tell you that we've been focused on instruction the last week as a central office. It hasn't been. We've been focused on, hope Dr. Chastain and her team have. The rest of the leadership team has been chasing down all these.
Mr. Vaught, you had your hand up.
Dr. Sullivan, what is the extent of discipline? What can you do?
Expel up to a year. And if somebody makes a credible threat, so up until a law change in July, and I understand where this came from. I believe there was someone in a rural county who did a gun signal to somebody and got expelled for a year. That's not what we're going to do. But that changed the state law to where now has to be a credible threat for me to do a zero tolerance.
Okay, outside of that, outside of you.
Yes. If it's not zero tolerance, then it still can be a level 4 violation, which still includes expulsion as discipline.
I'm carrying it a step further. I'm talking about the DA.
Yes, they absolutely can, and they have been charging students. So they've charged 2 so far, and I'm sure there's probably more to come.
What is the extent of the punishment there? Do you know, anybody know the law?
I don't know that we have that.
Due to privacy laws, we probably don't know that.
It is a Class E felony. It's a Class E felony. And so, I don't know the punishment in juvenile court, but it definitely is a serious crime, more than a misdemeanor.
They choose to file charges, but if it is serious enough and enough of a school disruption, I can file charges as well. I'd much rather not, but if we need to, I don't mind doing that as well. But each one, usually if it's a serious enough offense, our Sheriff's Department goes ahead and takes care of it too.
I guess I've realized after 2 weeks here, 3 weeks now, that, and I hate to laugh about this because it's just so ludicrous, school board, education, if the parents don't feel, if the students don't feel safe, they're not going to learn. If the parents don't feel like they're safe, they're not going to learn. And then you got these yahoos that's taking advantage of that manipulation of our society for kicks.
Absolutely.
And I get it, being a kid in high school, you're trying to get attention, but this is serious stuff, very serious stuff. And it's a disruption of 50-something thousand people, because it disrupts, well, probably more than that. There's 380,000 people in our county now, and if you got 50,000 in the school system and their parents, it's disrupting over half our population. It is. And I just wonder how serious these kids know it, and I hate to say this, somebody may have to be made an example out of it.
We've disciplined them all.
I spoke to a gentleman from Hamlin County who's on a school board there, and it's a much smaller county. And he basically said, I know y'all didn't want to do it, but I'm glad you did, about the 2 rest of juveniles that we had today. And maybe that'll make a difference, because this is not just a Rutherford County thing, it's a statewide thing. And Hamlin County is tiny compared to us, and they're having the same issues. And at some point, I don't know what we're going to do if this doesn't work, because we can't have school disruptions and parents being scared and kids being scared and teachers being scared for nothing.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, and it's gone as far as we've expelled for well over a year, probably 2 years. I got subpoenaed last year to juvenile court to ask, what do you do when a kid gets expelled? I'm like, it's up to the parent. They've been kicked out. They can come back next year. And so that's what we do. It's unfortunate. It's not anything you want to do. I don't want to brag about doing that. But if you're disrupting school, and the other part If parents come then to pick kids up at school because they're concerned for safety when we have a threat, that takes a very long time and a lot of manpower. Understand, if we had a true emergency that we had to evacuate, we have all kinds of protocols in place to evacuate large scale, different centers for people to check people out. But during a regular school day, we have to still check IDs one at a time, go get the kids to make sure the right people are showing up. So I get that parents get frustrated when they come to pick their kid up and they have to wait 20 minutes, but we're going to make sure they all go home with the right person.
Ms. Sharp?
Thank you. I spoke with Ben Torres with TSBA, and he said that, we need to go ahead and start charging these students and leave it up to the DA. Let us go ahead and start charging them, because I don't know it's so much of, they want the attention. I think it's the disruption. I think they want to get out of school, and they know this is the one thing that triggers everybody. It traumatizes our teachers. So I think that we are going to have to really put the law down and have a couple of people arrested and perp walked. Also, I did speak with Representative Stevens and say, we still have children, even if we did charge them and they didn't find it, we still need to have something in there. I know last year they did put in, they'll lose their driver's license for at least a year, or they won't get them for a year after they're eligible to get them. But we need to start calling our representatives, because we have to have some more teeth in these laws to put these children either in our virtual school, or they need to be out, because this is worse than anything that anybody can imagine with everyone dealing with it on a daily basis.
Do we need to do we as a board need to issue a letter to the DA or anything? I mean, not that I don't trust you, Dr. Sullivan. I know you will pursue this, but I think this needs a little teeth in it.
A resolution, perhaps?
Resolution. That's what I'm saying. This is ridiculous, really. Of course, you're talking about
We agree.
taking their license away from them. If you took their cell phone away from them, it'd probably be worse.
Yep.
Well, they're not supposed to have that either, but I understand that that's not.
I'm talking
Kind of
about
across-
permanently taking it away
Well,
from them.
yeah,
I don't see reason why we couldn't do a resolution. Mr. Reed, you still, I'm sorry.
Prepare a resolution to that effect.
Please do.
Even driver's licenses, if we lose driver's licenses, that's a
Okay.
deterrent as well.
Okay.
I think we need to have a field trip. Some of these kids get in trouble, put them on a school bus, take them to the state penitentiary, and put them in that cell and let them hear that jail door shut.
Scared straight.
And I know they did it.
Sheriff today, I don't think he was in
don't
this.
want no more.
I know they did it when I was growing up, man. I'll tell you what, I had nightmares, boy, for that.
Mr. Tidwell.
Yes, me and Dr. Sullivan actually were just talking about this very subject right before the meeting. It is spreading, and it's continuing. So we do need to have some tough consequences to come down, like Mr. Abbott had said, not to make an example out, but also to let others know that there are consequences for this type of action. It just feels like it's probably gone on without much in the past, and that's why they feel so free to do it now, because it does, for whatever reasons, they're being motivated to do that. But it holds up a lot of different resources, and it's definitely not good for our learning environment. So if we can move toward a resolution, I would certainly support that.
Got to have consequences.
Yep.
Is that all? Okay, move on to, Mr. Vaught, do you have anything regarding the Tennessee Legislative Network? No. And federal? No. Okay.
Oh, wished I did.
Okay, general discussion? Yes, Ms. Sharp.
I'd like to have a shout out to the Rutherford County Virtual School Principal Supacon and Vice Principal Parker. Thank you for the tour. Mr. Vaughn and Mr. Vaught and I went out last week and had a great tour. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for that area over there. It's absolutely incredible, the work that they're doing in that. It's kind of a small location, but it's really not, for all the work that they're doing with all the students. So just a shout out to them. I was very impressed with the teachers that were there and how they were addressing our students. Y'all, they have a PE class online, a PE class. So thankfully, you can't see the other students, because they wouldn't want to see me doing something or something. something like that. But shout out to the virtual school, and thank y'all for everything that you do. They went to the zoo a couple of weeks ago, and like 30 of the parents went with them. So it's growing in our community, and they're doing a fantastic job.
Oh, that's wonderful, and I love field trips. You know that about
Yeah,
me.
you know.
I just want to mention real quick, on September the 26th at Stewart's Creek Middle School at 6 p.m., they will have a, Rutherford County Schools, in conjunction with the Jason Foundation, will have a suicide awareness and prevention night. And I would encourage parents to go there, and if they even have an inkling of wanting to know strategies and different things to look for with their child, I encourage you to go. The Jason Foundation does a wonderful job.
Definitely, Jason Foundation is phenomenal. And really, it's worth the time. It could save your child's life.
Absolutely.
You know.
On a lighter note, I just want to say, I didn't get to make it out to Rockvale's dedication of their new turf field, but because I was out of town. But Riverdale will be having theirs next Friday at 6 o'clock before the game, and I encourage anyone, if you ever went to Riverdale High School, go out there and take a look at it. It looks pretty sharp.
They play in Oakland. Who they play?
You know, I can't remember. I think it's Coffee County, I think.
I believe you're right.
Yeah, Coffee County.
Yeah,
Go
just
ahead.
real quick, I forgot to mention during the safety discussion, we met with Sheriff Fitzhugh and his leadership team today and discussed quite a few things around safety to make sure we were all on the same page. And good hour-long meeting along a lot of different topics, so I appreciate their partnership.
Yes, Ms. Sharp.
Just in light of what could be a lot of discussion on Thursday, just a friendly reminder that board members, we do have policy and procedure to follow. We do have to seek chair recognition before we speak. So if we can just try to keep it orderly on Thursday, that would be fantastic.
Thank you for that. Anything else? Yes, Mr.
This kind of off subject, but Mr. Vaughn and I were talking about this after one of our visits. How can we be brought up to speed with the building program, the maintenance program, because I feel like, you know, after the first of the year, we're going to be heading toward the budget, and to be able to rationally make decisions during that budgetary time, I'd love somehow, and I don't want to bore the rest of the board with it.
October 18th at our fall board retreat.
Okay,
That's all
I
we
didn't
do.
know, I was, you know, coming from PBA, I mean, that's all we dealt with,
Yep.
was I knew something every month, and I didn't know if it'd be appropriate for Mr. Vaughn and I to visit with
and that would work,
Mr. Lee or something.
That would work as well. If you want to get caught up to what we've covered, that'd be absolutely perfect.
Before we walked off into it and not know anything at all,
I'm
so,
going to ask for $3 billion.
okay.
Not really, but it seems like a good thing to ask for.
Yeah, why not? Anyway, so, all right, good deal.
Is there anything else? Well, I look forward to seeing you all Thursday, and I'm going to say some prayer that this goes well Thursday night. And, yeah. Oh, pictures also, don't forget, pictures are prior to. So,
Move to adjourn.
thank you. Oh.